All right, you primitive screwheads, listen up.
They're coming to get you, Barbara.
I ate his liver with some fava beans and a nice Chianti.
Here's Johnny.
Vanity. Definitely my favorite sin.
I am the devil, and I am here to do the devil's work.
The power of Christ compels you.
This is my boomstick.
What's your favorite scary movie?
What up, horrorheads, and welcome to Shiver, a horror movie podcast. We are your hosts. I'm Daniel DeBona.
And I'm David Ulloa.
And if you were listening last week, we might be catching you off guard with the next statement because I did end last week's episode saying we are going to be talking about Bigfoot and that we were going to be sticking with found footage. All of that was wrong. We will be getting there. Turns out what we're actually doing is sticking with Europe and folk monsters to continue the year of the monster, this being the month of the folk monster, and we're going back to the water, but we're getting weird with it. So in a section that we're calling Mermaids 2 Electric Boogaloo, we're talking about a movie from 2015 called The Lure, a Polish movie with a title in Polish that doesn't seem like it just translates to The Lure. But what the hell do I know?
No, and the title's fantastic too. Corky Dancingu.
Yeah, Corky Dancingu.
Yeah.
This one was a lot, but also not much at all. Dave, tell us what you thought about The Lure.
I didn't think about The Lure. I have man, I didn't like this one. And I wanted to. I really wanted to like this one because it seemed funky. I'm always down for a musical. And the fact that this was a horror musical, I think the only other one that we've done is Anna and the Apocalypse.
I think so.
Which I really enjoyed.
Well, we did Rocky Horror with
we've done Rocky Horror.
Rocky
That's
Horror.
Right. And that's an amazing piece of garbage,
Yeah.
So I don't know what I was expecting here. But the reviews were quite good, the critical reviews. The audience reviews, not so much. So I was like, you know what? When a movie is split like this, I tend to side with the critics. Not always, but I tend to side with the critics. And didn't happen. I think that there's a couple of things that kind of play into that. I think one of them is the subtitle translation.
Yeah.
I have a feeling that it was almost a word for word translation instead of a spirit of the message translation.
Right.
And it suffered for it. To me, nothing anyone said made much sense. And I feel like if I had watched the movie on mute, it would have almost made more sense. So there was that. Additionally, I didn't like the music very much. I thought it was it was okay. And I'm the type of guy who I like Soviet funk. There's no rhyme or reason to the things that I like musically, but I feel like I have a very eclectic taste in music. Like I'll listen to Gojira and I'll listen to Rammstein, but then I'm also gonna listen to bossa nova stuff. And
I wrote that new Sabrina Carpenter right now.
Bro, fucking espresso is my jam, man. I feel like you can have a conversation with me about music and it'll always go in a direction that's positive. I couldn't get into this, man. I really, really couldn't. Nothing about the logic in this movie made any sense. I realize it's a fairy tale, but I feel like even within the realm of Hans Christian Andersen, which this is pulling from, there was not much here. I do like what they did with the mermaids themselves. And I guess when we talk about the monster, we'll get to that. But not enough to salvage this movie, at least not for me. I don't know how you felt.
So I was torn a lot during this movie. I texted you as I was watching it and literally said, "Is this movie good? No. But is the mythology solid? Yes, and I'm hanging on to that." So I did watch this movie and I was just trying to kind of cling to this mermaid mythos that they were building and drawing from. And I did enjoy that, but this movie did leave a lot to be desired, especially in the music. Like you're talking about, and I think that the music suffered from the exact thing you talked about, which is that literal translation. My roommate walked in at one point, and I'm just kind of sitting there watching it, and I was like, maybe if you speak Polish, these songs are meaningful or they're not
Right.
super hacky. But the way that the lyrical translations that we got in the subtitles to this movie played across, these were songs written for and by elementary school children. They didn't
Yeah.
there was nothing deep to them. Like you're watching these songs play out in scenes that you realize you're supposed to be drawing some sort of emotion from, but then you're reading these just basic words. I mean, it's like reading fortune cookies to a tune
I
during
might have enjoyed that more.
and so that really did, while you would think that might not kill the movie, so much of this movie was centered around the songs that they were singing. It was a musical. I mean, it is not very long into this movie before you are into a musical number. And, and I'm talking full song and dance routine it through a department store.
Mhm.
And
Which I think might have been the best one.
agreed. And so you have to be into the music. And so I am holding on to hope that there was something lost in translation there, where
Mhm.
we were getting just really Americanized versions of what they were saying. The scene from Goodfellas where he tells the story and then he's like, it sounds better in Italian because you use this
Yes.
word, and it means he's content to be an asshole, and it changes the feeling of the story. That's what I think happened here. I think that there's as what I'm hoping happened here, because I really wanted to like this. I was super stoked to do one about mermaids that were these siren style old sea story mermaids. And I'm really hoping that there is a nuance to telling the story in Polish that we did not receive as Americans subtitles. That being said, I
Mhm.
didn't hate it, but it would be a stretch to say I liked it. I know the realm I'm in when we get to the end of this thing and kind of how I'm going to rate it, but I'm not exactly sure where I'm going to go, because there are a couple of saving graces here. There are a couple of things that I think made for a good movie. This is once again case in point what happens when you trust the internet to tell you what is a horror movie. There are definitely some horrific scenes
I
in
think
this
there's
movie.
enough elements of horror to call it a horror.
Yeah.
But I think the most horrific thing is the pacing.
Mhm. I agree completely. And so, I mean, let's get into the pacing. Let's talk about the story in
Mhm.
and for anybody listening or watching live, I'm seeing the titles to these sections as you are, because my computer was having a time getting on. So in a section that we're calling Pierogi a Go-Go, take us through the story and what you thought of what was presented to us with the lure.
Look, this is essentially a retelling of Hans Christian Andersen's The Little Mermaid.
Mhm.
Um, there's two mermaids. They find their way to Poland, and they start singing for a nightclub, and they fall in love. One of them falls in love with a bass player right off the bat.
And looks like he just got kicked out of the Strokes.
Yeah, and listen, man, I've played in a couple of bands in my entire life. It was never the bass player. There was Landon Mermaids. Never, ever. All right. This is how I know that this was not made by someone who was ever a part of the scene. Okay. Um, twists and turns that don't make any sense. She falls in love. The lore is that if he marries someone else, and she falls in love, she will turn to foam and eat him like sea foam if she doesn't eat him by the dawn of the next day. And of course, that's where the movie ends up. And that's all I'm going to talk about the story, because I number one, I don't understand why anyone did anything here. Nothing was predicated upon intent. Things just seemed to happen. And I'm gonna make a statement. I don't often like lambast filmmakers, because I feel like they put a lot of heart and a lot of effort into the stuff that they make. And as someone who is artistic myself, like when I wrote music, I always put all of myself into it. And I'm sure there's people that heard it and said, this is fucking awful, you know. But I put myself into that, you know, and as a photographer and an amateur, you know, photographer, and I feel the same way. This to me seems like a film school, like a first year film school student who thinks that by being edgy, she's being artsy.
Right.
And I don't mean that to be offensive to film school students, or to the artistic crowd. I know that sounds like I'm kind of putting that crowd down. I think of myself as part of that crowd. But that's exactly what this feels like. It's almost like, have you ever seen Andy Warhol's movies?
Yeah.
Okay, they're not good at all. They're exercises in art, and most of it is just pushing the envelope of what you can do with cinema. Because a lot of it hadn't been done by artists before. It had been done by producers who were trying to push the envelope. And it's not good. And I can't figure out why any decision this movie was made, starting with something that I'm a big fan of, making it a period piece. I
Right.
don't understand why this movie was set in the 80s. Why you're pushing the 80s when literally nothing about the political or social goings on at that time played into the movie.
Yeah, that stuff was all weird.
Yeah, you know, and it's like when I saw the remake of what's this one? Suspiria, the Luca Guadagnini remake. I understood why he said it in the 70s. And at first I was like, okay, well, he's just trying to call back to the original. But no, there was more to it. And he made it very much a comment on the politics of the time and the social issues of the time, and the contemporary issues of that time. But there's none of that here. And it might be because I'm not Polish and I don't see the subtext that's there. But I don't know how someone who is Polish would pick up on that either, because I feel like the story was so centered on the characters and not on anything that was going on around them. Like, we barely saw the outside world.
Yeah.
So I don't understand any of the decisions that were made in this movie. I wanted to like it. The lighting was occasionally interesting. But again, that's not story. And I really wish I liked this one. I wish I had something nice to say, because number one, it's a woman filmmaker, a foreign woman filmmaker, and this was her debut film. I want to say something positive about this thing. And I realize that this is now like almost 10 years old. And I do know, because I looked through her filmography, she's made a couple of other movies since then. and I'm sure they've gotten better, but I have zero interest in watching them now.
Yeah, this movie did a lot of things wrong. And so when you start with the story, there was a point you made there that continually rears its head as something that is a major problem. And that is the fact that we never have enough exposition. We've said on this show plenty of times, you don't have to spoon feed us mountains of exposition for your movie to make sense. But we need some. We need a little. We're like why is like you've created this world where nobody is shocked that these women are mermaids, right?
Mhm.
You've got this strip club owner who apparently was on the hunt for mermaids and was very excited when he finally got his hand on a pair. You've got these people who just kind of take it all in and it's all just happening, and okay, fine. Sure, I'll give you some of that, but give me a little bit of a reason why. Give me one person telling me that, as a child they heard these stories and it was something that had always fascinated them, and they had an uncle who told them, or give me something. Give me one little brief monologue as to why the world is so accepting of these creatures,
Mhm.
because that didn't make any sense to me. But if I kind of steamroll past that one, give me something. There are plenty of movies that we watch where just kind of one thing happens after another, but those aren't usually dramatic movies that seem to be selling some sort of message about love or loss or something
Mhm.
like that. The movies that carry well because of that are splatterfest slashers, and we're okay with that because we're in it for how are you going to set up the next kill. This movie didn't give me enough for what they were presenting as dramatic elements
Mhm.
to make sense. It like there's a whole thing where one of the girls goes and she gets upset, so she goes and kills some stranger, eats his heart.
Gold.
Yeah, Gold.
Yeah.
Kills a stranger. They end up finding out the people that they're staying with from their band. He knocks out both the mermaids. They throw them in the water, and guess they just figured they'd never come back. None of those choices make sense. But then
Mhm.
all of that leads to this super bizarre scene of the family fighting and then all getting alcohol poisoning, and then a musical
Yeah.
number where they're given vodka via IV and now they're better. And like I said, there's always going to be a lingering thing in the back of my mind that in Polish there's subtext to some of this, that there is nuance that
Mhm.
we're missing. And that was the very first thing you said at the top, is that's where it suffered. This movie seems to be made by a Polish person for Polish people, and that's it. And while there is nothing wrong with that, when the movie then goes to a mass worldwide release, I mean, Max has been shoving this thing down my throat. Now, I'm sure that part of that is because of my algorithm, because of the shit that I watch on Max. But this entire month of Folktale Creatures was schemed around the fact that Max would not let me sleep at night unless I agreed to watch The Lure. And they were emailing me, they're calling me at 4 in the morning drunk. I mean, it was too much. So I was like, all right, look, I'm gonna watch The Lure and I'll do you one better. I'm gonna give you a whole month of Folktale Creatures, right? And I do think that there's nothing wrong with necessarily with making a movie for a specific audience like that. But if it's going to be something that's going to be pushed beyond just a local release and showing it in Polish theaters, there has to be a message there that translates. Last week we talked about in Troll Hunter, we talked about them telling a story that was offensively Norwegian, And yet we were able to relate to it. We were able to enjoy
Right.
it. We were able to understand everything that was going on. If in fact this movie is offensively Polish, then they have done nothing to create an environment where anything but someone who's really into Polish folklore is going to enjoy this.
Mhm.
And I did the same thing as we were going into it, where I was looking at critic scores and audience scores. And I do that on occasion, like when it's something I've never seen, just because I don't want, if I pull something up, it's like, okay, look, it's 20s across the board. Let's leave this one alone. But this one did kind of hit all over the place. And it was like, all right, maybe. And then after I saw it and I started researching it a little bit, I started to wonder if the critical acclaim that this received is similar to the critical acclaim that Barbarian received, which is, how much of a dick bag does it make me to be a dude who shits on a female filmmaker's freshman project?
Mhm.
And so I did start to wonder that, because I can't fathom some of the great scores that this movie got, because the story here is, I'm not going to say non-existent, but I'm going to say that it doesn't make any sense. I don't understand kind of what they were after. I'm still not 100% sure if Silver was upset because she also wanted the bassist, or if Silver was upset because she might be losing her friend to a guy. That was never really kind of played out. I just,
What exactly the relationship is never really established, because they make her seem like the dark one, the edgy one. And then no, that's Gold. Silver's the one who falls in love with the
yes,
bass player,
sorry.
and she's the one who seems more um like, ready to join the world, and she's like the Disney Ariel, as it were,
Yeah.
right? Just infinitely more obsessed with owning a vagina. Um I don't know what their deal is. Like, are they friends? Are they sisters? Are they cousins? Are they lovers? What are they, just two mermaids that found each other and they sing together? And then why one believes what is known to be true about their own like genetics, and why the other one does believe it? I mean, why? Where does the lore come from? Because at the very least, when we're watching Troll Hunter, part of why it works so well is because the lore is fleshed out.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem like happenstance, and everything in this movie seems like they're just throwing shit in a pot and seeing what happens. And sometimes you get really delicious chili. But the problem is that when you're not figuring out, like, these beans go well with this meat, goes well with this pepper, if you're not sitting there and thinking about how shit mixes in a pot, you're gonna get diarrhea stew. And
Yeah.
that is what you got here. You got mermaid diarrhea stew.
Yeah, it just, so little of it made sense. Now, I think that you're right in the fact that I did get sucked into the fact that it continuously kind of shocked me with what
Mhm.
was happening next, and that kept me on board enough to to keep watching. I did kind of want to see what happened next. I'm fascinated by the idea that not only did they transplant legs onto her, which I'm not even willing to discount that. I love the movie Face Off, but I do love that they also took her tail and put it on the broad that gave her legs. Like, that woman didn't just die, they just kind of switched lower halves. That was bizarre. I was kind of here for it. I there were a lot of weird things that kept me watching, but I do believe they were shocking for the fact of being shocking. I think
Yeah.
I think that this was somebody who wanted to see a different version of Hans Christian Andersen's Little Mermaid brought to life, that wanted to see one where it doesn't end with the mermaid living happily ever after. If you're unfamiliar with Hans Christian Andersen's Little Mermaid, it's a lot. Well, obviously they all are. It's a lot darker than the Disney version, but in the end, the Little Mermaid doesn't get the guy. In the end of Hans Christian Andersen's Little Mermaid, she turns to sea foam, and then just kind of washes away because she is heartbroken and has lost everything. She gave up everything and then got nothing for it. She also is made to dance constantly, and whenever she does, it feels like she's walking on knives. That was a whole other thing. But this, I can see where somebody wanted to. I keep saying somebody. The screenplay is by Robert Bolesto. I can see where he wanted to bring something to life that was going to view that grim side of what the Little Mermaid was. Unfortunately, he just didn't do it well. What he gave us was a screenplay that at least doesn't make any sense in English. And then what the director gave us, and I'm not even going to attempt her name. There are way too many Z's and Y's in that bad boy.
I'm going to
try. You
want
to give it a shot?
I'm going to try. I think it's Agnieszka Smoczynska.
Whoa, I would have been way off. I would have. I'm going to assume that even if you're in the ballpark, I was 2 states over. I had nothing on that one. But
that literally just comes from my knowledge of reading Soviet spy books. That's it.
But what the director gave us was, I don't know, like it wasn't fleshed out enough to feel artsy. And I think that's the problem. I think that ultimately where this lies is you got to do more one way or the other. Like if you're going to go art house with it, you got to go fucking art house. Like you've got to have at no point in there an opportunity where it just gets like bland or just formulaic. If you're going to go art house with it, then lean the fuck in. And that never really happened, but also salient story never really happened either. So I don't know, man. I don't know.
When it comes to art house movies, I tend to like them even if I don't like the story.
That's swear to God, I thought you were going to say I tend to like them even if I don't like them. I was like, proceed.
Oh, pretentious much? No, I tend to like them like overall, even if I can't get into the story, even if I don't understand the story, because there's something that is pulling me towards it. There's a gravity. And I think one of the best examples of this, like I think that a mainstream art house film, and we don't talk about it that way anymore because it's just such a part of the social zeitgeist that it's like, oh yeah, it's this super famous sci-fi movie. 2001: A Space Odyssey is an art house film,
right?
It's practically a silent film, and what exactly happens on screen, unless you're familiar with the short story that inspired Kubrick to get with Arthur C. Clarke, and they write the novel and pen the screenplay together, like it makes no sense at all. And I've heard Steven Spielberg talk about how he saw the movie when it came out and had no idea what it was about, but he kept going back to the theater to watch it again because he was just like engrossed with what he was seeing, that he had never seen anything like that before. That's what an art house film should do to you. I could not wait for this movie to finish. That might sound funny, but it's really not. I started this on Monday and I got about 45 minutes in and I thought that I was almost done with it. And when the baby woke up, it was, I don't know, maybe close to midnight. Baby woke up, he was coughing. And I was like, thank fucking God that I have a reason to stop this movie. And I was looking for a reason not to finish this movie. I really was. Because yesterday I was like, man, you know what? I'm gonna finish this movie. And then I was like, oh, I really don't want to watch the presidential debate, but guess what I'm going to do instead of watching this movie? I'm going to watch the debate. And that, like, I kept finding reasons not to finish it. I thought to myself, if I don't finish this thing, will anyone know? I would know. So I did finish it, but I didn't want to. And when it was finally over, I felt like I had been released.
Right.
And I think that's the worst that anyone can ever feel with a movie.
Yeah, I was not quite in that boat, but it was one where I was pausing it at one point and being like, how much longer does this? I need to know just how much, what percentage of my life I'm going to continue to devote to this, because you mentioned earlier the pacing, and it does, it just, sometimes it just drags. And you, like, I was like, come on, give me more bizarre musical numbers where she pulls him into a bathtub and they're in the sea. I want that stuff. I want
Yeah.
more of that. If this is going to be fantastical, then make it fantastical. Go to town with it. Again, lean in. Quit just tickling the balls of 4 or 5 different genres and pick one and just jerk this thing, because I don't know. It never fulfilled any of the things that it seemed like it was trying to.
Yeah, I'm right there with you, man. So we could continue to shit on this movie, but I feel bad. I feel bad doing it. I don't. I really don't. I really fucking hated this movie, but I feel like I should feel bad shitting on this movie this much. So let's move on to our cast. So in a section that we're calling bandmates, and if this thing goes, it's not popping up.
In a section that we're calling bandmates, because it seems like I might have lost Dave, we are going to talk about the cast for this movie. Now, there have been plenty of movies. Oh, there he is. He's back.
Yep. There we go. Sorry about that.
So there have been plenty of movies where we use the phrase economy of characters. And usually we try to find a way, or hopefully presented with a way, that even though we only have a couple people to talk about, they all did something worth talking about. This is not one of those movies, especially because we've got the mermaids in their own section. Everybody in this movie who's not a mermaid is two-dimensional, is giving them too much credit.
Yeah.
Everybody in this movie who is not a mermaid is one sentence of character description, and that's one of the things that sucks. Plus, I kept getting confused as to whether or not the lead singer of the band and the other blonde woman with like the crimpy blonde hair were the same person.
The same. Yeah.
Until I saw them on the boat together at the same time at the very end of the movie, I kept thinking that she was some sort of weird spiritual counterpart to the lead singer of the band. And if you don't believe me when I tell you that everybody in this movie is two-dimensional, is giving them too much credit, there's only one character in this movie who is not a mermaid, who has a goddamn name. And that's Triton, who was presented like he was going to be the coolest and most interesting character. We needed more Triton. We needed more of him, because he was the only one who ever started to begin to flesh out the mythology that they were giving us about these mermaids. He's the one who tells us about how if she falls in love and he marries someone else, she's going to turn to sea foam, and he got his horns ripped off, and that's how he became human and all this. And he's some weird Polish Gigi Allen. I want more Triton. Yeah. Triton is, honest to God, the only character in this movie outside of the mermaids that I think is worth talking about. I mean, the others were literally named the bassist, the house manager, it doesn't make any sense to put all the effort into making a movie and to do what seems like so little while you're making it. This movie needed more Triton. I needed him showing up at shows or something, talking to other people. I needed Gold to be a bigger part of his band so that she was spending more time with him and learning more about her own history and her own mythology, if nothing else for my sake.
And he introduced, I think, the only point in the movie where there seemed to be a hint that there might be some sort of character development going on.
Right.
To me, by the end of it, it seemed like a throwaway line. I thought that finally, with like 15 minutes left in the movie, we were finally going to start to get somewhere. After she performs on stage with Triton's band, she's all giddy. Gold, right? She's all giddy. She's so, happy with herself. And he looks at her and he says, you need to do some work.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh shit, finally we're getting somewhere where like people are starting to realize that like there's more to them than like what's inherently inside them, and they have to go on some sort of journey. Like, what the fuck's gonna happen now? And that whole thing was just dropped when the bass player found the hot chick and was like, oh, I guess I'm gonna marry you now.
Yeah.
With like zero, prompted by nothing, by fucking nothing. I don't know. I don't know, man. I think even talking about Triton this much, with the fact that he gave us 2 scenes, I wish I had something positive to say, and I'm not going to say that it's on the actors. I think that this is just one of the worst scripts that's ever been committed to film.
Yeah, I will say, if we're going to talk characters, can we just talk about the fact that there is never in the history of breaking up with a girl been a shittier reason than being grossed out by the fact that you got blood on yourself from fresh surgery scars while trying to have sex with her? Like that, like he was already like, whatever. He wasn't anything. Like, it was like, oh, okay. No, because at first the bassist, and we're not calling him the bassist because we can't remember his name. It's literally
that
what he's
is his
billed
name.
as.
Yeah.
At first, the bassist is like, you'll never be anything more than me, to be more to me than an animal. You're just a fish. And she sings to him and he falls in love. Okay, cool. Like, all right, sure. And then he gets no more development until we find out that he's just one of the shittiest humans ever, because as far as we can tell, the reason he leaves her is because he's like, hey, I know you're still learning to walk, and those scars across your midsection where your entire lower half has just been transplanted are still bleeding.
Because of me.
Right, because of me, because I convinced you to do this.
Right.
And then it's not even like, it's literally just blood like on his midsection. Yeah, you're laying on an open wound. That happens. And then it's like, well, we're done now. And it's like, what? Like in the history of shitty dudes, like we're like, this guy is making a case to have his face carved into that mountain, because it was, I was like, I don't even know. This is, again, like, this isn't a good plot point. This is just making him seem like the shittiest dude of all time. And I was very confused about how they landed on that being what split them up. Like, that again, you're talking about, it seems like they're just throwing stuff in there and kind of seeing what sticks. And it just seems like, well, we need a reason for him to break up, because that's how the story goes.
Right.
And that was the best you could come up with. That scene right there did more damage to my opinion of this screenwriter than most of the movie, because until that point,
it gave her a reason to kill him too.
Yeah.
Because he takes everything from her and then leaves her.
Yeah, because we didn't even mention during the story, when she loses her lower half, she also loses her voice. That's part of
not
their
right
mermaid
away.
mythology.
And I don't understand that. She loses it, at what point? I don't know why it happens then. Is it a gradual thing? Because her volume didn't go down,
Right.
It's just like one scene she's got it, and the next scene she don't. And it was many scenes after she had already, that I don't know, man. I will say that I do have a least favorite character. And to me, it was the militia lieutenant, the
Okay.
the police inspector,
Uh-huh.
the detective lady. And again, it has nothing to do with the actress, Katarzyna Herman. Nothing to do with her. Has everything to do with the fact that it is just maybe the worst written character ever, because that might be my least favorite musical number that follows, because it's not that it makes no sense. It makes negative sense.
Yeah. Yeah. It's that scene from Happy Gilmore where it's like, you're so wrong that we're all dumber now
Yeah.
from listening to you. That is that scene. That was the scene that made me sit back and wonder
Billy
if
Madison.
Billy Madison, yes,
Yeah,
sorry.
yeah.
I just saw something the other day about Happy Gilmore 2 is in production, and that's
Yeah,
I
that's
had Happy
exciting.
Gilmore on the brain. Looking much more forward to that. So that scene with the militia lieutenant was the second time. Well, no. It was the third or fourth time when sex with these mermaids was just overtly a main plot point.
Mhm.
But that was the first time it got like graphic. And
Yeah.
it really started to feel like this movie was started as some sort of bizarre fetish film that just went feature length, and they cut the actual like penetration out.
Okay, you know what? I felt like that on a number of occasions.
Yeah. Yeah. Like there were plenty of times during this movie where I was like, is is the dude who wrote this, does he just have like a mermaid fetish and this was the closest he could get to getting somebody to finance mermaid porn? And that and yet, because of the song that was playing and just the way that it was all presented, it was in no way it wasn't sensual at all. And not just
No.
because one of the people in it was half a fish. It was
Right.
it was not sensual. I've seen The Shape of Water. I've seen Creature from the Black Lagoon. You
Mhm.
can have sexual tension even when one of the people is a
A
creature.
fish dude, yeah.
Yes, none. None here. Just icky, icky. Like there was no other
Yeah.
word for the way that that was presented. It felt gross. And
Yeah.
it was so weird.
And to that point, it reminded me of one specific movie. I don't know if you ever saw a movie called Nine Songs.
I did not.
All right, so it's basically, I mean, it's straight up erotica. It is, unsimulated sex between two actors, and it is the story of a summer that these two people spent going to concerts and fucking.
Oh, okay.
And the movie itself, like, never pretends to be anything other than a movie about people going to concerts and fucking. The thing is that because it leans into that, dude, it's actually a pretty good movie. Like, if you can, as a viewer, get over the fact that you're watching two actors, and they are like actors, because like they would go on to do, other films, so they're not porn actors, right? Two actors like just fuck each other, which is actually a little weirder than you might think it is. It's very voyeuristic.
Okay.
It's really enjoyable in the sense that, like, you're seeing something real between two people, and in an artistic way, that's kind of beautiful.
Right.
And then the fact that the bonding is happening over reason why it's called Nine Songs is because there are these nine performances that bond them together throughout the course of this relationship. Man, if this movie had just leaned into that, where it was like, listen, I want to make a fish porn movie.
Right.
Dude, fucking do it. And I'd probably watch that movie. There's very little that I won't watch. Like, nothing grosses me out to the point where I'm like, no, I'm not going to watch that thing. But this to me was just, it seemed like it couldn't commit to what it wanted to be. And since it didn't really know what it wanted to be, it couldn't commit to it, and so like that's like this cycle that's perpetuated where it's like, plants crave electrolytes. It's what they crave. That's what the fuck is actually going on here. It's why the characters are so, forget two-dimensional, like these are one-dimensional. They're not even existing on an X and a Y axis. Like they are just so flat. God, I wish
Yeah, I'm with you. It doesn't it doesn't make sense. Like none of it makes sense. The characters are given nothing to work with, because and so should any of these random Polish folks come across this, we don't blame you, because you watch this movie and you can tell that it's not that they were given something amazing that they couldn't act. They tried their damnedest. You could tell they were trying. They were trying to make something out of and she's licking up the spine of the mermaid tail and stuff. She's trying. But it was the first time in my life that I understood the phrase "gave me the ick." Like I've understood like the denotation of "give me the ick." This was the first time where I feel like I could have used it and it was applicable. I was like, no. Like I got nothing to say here.
100%.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
there's not much there to talk about with these characters, because you're right, two-dimensional is a stretch.
Yeah. And so that leaves us really with the two most important characters to talk about. So in the same section we did last week, and we'll do 2 weeks, next week and the one after, legend has it, we're talking about the folk monster, in this case, the mermaid. So was this something that we can say, hey, there was a positive here?
Yes.
Okay.
Now, I am not going to claim that the actual mermaids that we got in this were necessarily a positive, but I am going to shine a light on the fact that they did take the time to give us another type of mermaid. This isn't your Disney mermaid. This isn't your Barbie mermaid. This is your grizzled old sailor siren mermaid, and I do love that. I do love the idea that they gave us these mermaids that we actively watch eat people. That I did spend some time today trying to find any sort of ideological thing, like through the history of mermaids. There is historical context, or mythological context, in the idea that when mermaids dry out, then they have legs. When they get wet, they grow their tails back. They didn't make that up. So I really did appreciate the time that they put into kind of building that. And the one little bit of story building we got about, well, if she cuts off her tail, she's gonna lose her voice, and if she falls in love with this guy and he marries someone else, she's gonna turn to sea foam. I did really like that stuff. I even bizarrely enjoyed what I couldn't tell if it was telepathy or if it was some sort of like high-pitched wail that only
frequency.
the two of them could hear, because it was usually prefaced by a kind of screeching sound in the score. So when my first thought was, oh, why the fuck did they make him telepathic? The next time it happened, I heard that screech and I was like, okay, well then maybe, if their song is capable of convincing people to jump to their deaths and be eaten, then it's not too outside the realm of possibility that they can also communicate at a frequency that humans can't hear. The one shining point of this movie is that it was an interesting take on the mermaid. And by interesting, I mean it was not a modern take. I mean, this is a Chaucer aged ancient Greek take on the siren and the mermaid. And the one thing about this movie I did really like, I do think that they gave us just enough of that to at least keep that part of the story interesting. The problem was there was all this other movie that got in the way.
Yeah, I really would have liked to have seen this take on the mermaid in another movie.
Yes.
And I'm not saying that I want this writer and director to do a redo. That's certainly not what I want. Um, I would I don't you know what? I don't even know that I need it. I can just imagine. I'm like, "Oh, it'd be better with a different story, where anything happened." And okay, great.
Yeah.
I do like, the 2 actresses that played the mermaids. I thought that they were cast well. Marta Mazurek as Silver and, Michalina Olsanska, yeah, as Golden. They're both beautiful in different ways. Very much, seductive in different ways. And I think embodied what we think of as, um wholesome and not all at once
Right.
in their own ways. Um, but to me, that's like a good monster is not enough to make a monster movie, you know?
Yeah.
And a folk monster is only as good as its folklore. And you can get the lore, but if you don't weave that lore into a story, what you've got is an idea.
Yeah.
And ultimately that's all we had. Was we had an idea of a monster, and it wasn't even integral to the story, because really it kind of just sets up the beginning, how these mermaids get on land, and then sets up the end where the mermaid turns to sea foam.
Yeah. That
Literally everything else could have been,
just 2 girls.
2 girls. Yeah.
Yeah, and I that was the thought that I had too, was if you remove the fact that they're mermaids from this movie and you just make the same movie, nothing changes except for the very end when she turns to seafoam. When you could have, anything could have happened. She could have just run away
Dies of heartbreak.
dies of heartbreak, and then her friend kills the dude, and it could have just been that. Could have just been that they were two women, and one of them was a little unhinged and killed somebody and had
Yeah.
sex with the police chief or whatever. The fact that they were mermaids wasn't part of the movie, because even if you look at the fact that they were such a big draw in this club, you could seriously, you could have just put two pretty naked girls in that thing and people probably would have responded the exact same way.
Yeah. Well,
And
I mean,
I
they did. They
Yeah.
put 2 pretty naked girls in the
Right, I know, but
in
then
the
they at
club.
least but then like when they put them in like the big martini glass, like the Dita Von Teese like
Oh, yeah,
martini
yeah,
glass
yeah.
thing, they did grow their tails and be like, ah. But also, if the reveal had just been, look, they're hot and young and naked, I think people would have responded the same way. And
Yeah.
that goes back to that bizarre thing where it was just like, I don't understand. I don't, and that's what I kept coming back to as I was watching this. It's just so much of the movie that I didn't understand. And we've talked about plenty throughout this year, the idea of a good movie monster making you question the human experience or who's really the bad guy, and blah blah blah. When you break this movie down, everybody's just kind of the bad guy, and it didn't make me question anything. I never felt like I was like I was like at one point I was like, all right, yeah, cool, rip his throat out, he's a dickhead, and then she didn't, and I was like,
Yeah.
oh, that's sad. But then her friend did, and I was like, oh, okay. But I couldn't even, for as much as I'm talking about as shitty as he is, like I couldn't even like get hyped when Golden ripped his throat out, right? Like as much as I wanted to, because
Mhm.
she had just seen her best friend's sister, mermaid, whatever, turn into sea foam. Like I couldn't even be like, good for you. Like I couldn't even have my Carrie moment out of it where it was like, yeah, you just killed
Yeah.
a bunch of people, but they deserved it. I didn't care at that point. And I do think that, like I said, mythology, shining point, actual use of the mermaids, giant turd. So,
Yeah.
you know, and
Yeah.
like you said, it's easy for us to sit there and rip something apart, and I will give us credit. I don't think it's something we do often, but I do think that when a movie warrants it, we kind of get at it. And this is one that we deserved a better movie out of the setup that we got from this movie. And I think that ultimately that's what this is going to boil down to.
Yeah, and I I can't add anything to that. So with that, all we have left to do is to rate this movie. We discussed Danny and I at the top of the show before the show started, and the first thing that came to our minds as a metric for this, because those of you who are longtime listeners will know that we never rate a movie against anything other than itself. It would be unfair to any movie, particularly this one, to rate it against anything else other than itself. So every movie gets its own metric system. So Daniel, out of a possible 5 mermaid pussies, because that is what the movie is ultimately about.
Correct.
It's what Silver wants, right? And that's what she calls it. She says, I want my pussy.
Yeah, she literally looked at the guy and was like, "Soon I'm gonna have legs and a pussy," and it was like, okay,
Yeah, that's one way to put it. So out of a possible 5 mermaid pussies, how many mermaid pussies do you give this?
I want to say that the mythology here is enough for me to like add a mermaid pussy onto this, because as we routinely will reference, there are actually 2 mermaid pussies in the movie, right? So you'd be like, oh, well, it's got to earn at least that, but it doesn't. It doesn't. Honestly, the only thing that's keeping me from giving this a 0, which I've never done, I even gave Wicker Man 1. Uh,
Yeah.
the only thing that's keeping me from giving this a 0 is the fact that there was some fun mermaid mythology here. That's the only thing that's getting it any points. Yes, there were some interesting lighting choices and stuff like that, but so much of it was so bad that all of that stuff was outshined. The only thing I can hang on to in this movie is that I did get a fun take on the mermaid. But that's it. To talk any more about it would be pissing in the wind at this point, because there's nothing left to say. This is a 1. This is 1 mermaid pussy, and the mythologist kind of barely earned it that.
I'm gonna be right there with you. I don't think I ever considered giving it 0 because there was, I think, an attempt at something. I think that's what differentiates this from something like Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey. Right? There was no attempt at making a good movie. I think there was barely an attempt at making a bad movie in that one. I think that everyone involved tried to do something here. And while I don't think that in itself should be rewarded, I think it should be acknowledged, because I don't want to be. I know that it's very easy to look at the scores that we give out and be like, oh well, Daniel and David are always giving out, at least a 3.
Right.
And it's not because I think that you and I are too nice to these movies and to the filmmakers and the actors and crew and all that. I think it's just because there's redeeming qualities in a lot of stuff. And I don't see it here. The few positives that we've talked about are not positives when taken on their own. In fact, all it does is remind me that literally everything else in this movie is so bad.
Yeah. Yeah, it was rough. So there you have it. Unanimously, one mermaid pussy on this one. Definitely not recommending The Lure to anybody. Definitely never watching this movie again. But we've seen it and we're not any better for it. But there we have it. We've
Nope.
committed it to the internet forever. And that is another folklore creature checked off. So make sure you head to shiverpod.com where you can find links to all of our social media. We're on Instagram. Oh, and
We got one comment.
There's Greg chiming in saying late to the party, but it sounds like he's probably good. He missed this movie. Yeah, Greg, it is.
Yeah.
Your time was much better spent coming down. Greg actually visited Tuscaloosa, but I was working so hard, didn't get a chance to meet him this weekend. So I hope my town treated you well. Your Instagram pictures made it look like you had a good time. So head over there where you can find links to all of our social media. Like I said at the end of last week's episode, but this week I'm being truthful. We will be back next week with found footage. We're going back across the pond. We're bringing it back home to America, where we will be doing Willow Creek, a found footage film where the monster is Bigfoot. And again, we're going this 3 weeks in a row, movies that neither one of us have seen. So can't be any worse, right?
Well, hang on, man.
Let me knock on some wood here.
We gave this one.
That is true.
Right. Yeah, but it was one mermaid pussy. So, that I don't know. One Bigfoot dick. I don't know. We'll figure it out. So on behalf of all of us here at Shiver, fright you very much.